Quick heads up, this story gets graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion advised. Even the police officers were crying like children. The entire courtroom was in tears. But this story didn't start in a courtroom. It started on a quiet street where an 8-year-old girl vanished. Everyone assumed she was taken by a predator. But tragically, they were looking in all the wrong places. The killer was right there with them. He handed out flyers with her picture and even helped with the search. And you won't believe who it turned out to be. But the most terrifying part isn't who did it. It's where he hid the body for a week while the entire town was on high alert. And most importantly, it's why. His explanation was so absurd and chilling that it was the reason even hardened cops broke down in tears. Hello everyone, Dwight here again. Before we dive into today's shocking case, I have my usual request. If you're not already with us, now is the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future stories. It's literally one click, and as always, it's completely free. And now for the fun part, our roll call in the comments. Let me know, where are you watching from, what time is it, what's the weather like outside, and what tasty snacks did you get ready for this story? All right, let's get into it. To understand this story, you first need to understand the city where it happened. Jacksonville, Florida, this isn't just a dot on a map. This is a giant of a city, so vast in area that it's the largest in the continental United States. It's cut in half by the unique St. Johns River, which flows north, defying all the rules. Jacksonville is home to 2 large naval bases, so the roar of jet engines is a familiar sound in the city. It's also known as the birthplace of Southern rock, where the band Lynyrd Skynyrd got its start. And a unique local tradition is the Duval chant, the name of their county, which thousands of people shout in stadiums. But this story didn't happen in the bustling downtown or the port docks. It happened in one of its quiet, sleepy suburbs, the Lakewood neighborhood. Lakewood is a completely different world. It's the perfect picture of the 1950s American dream. Neat brick houses, perfectly manicured lawns, and quiet streets where nothing ever seems to happen. It was a place of absolute trust, where neighbors knew each other by name, and children played freely outside until dark. Lakewood was that safe cocoon, meant to protect from the dangers of the big city. It was here, on June 17th, 1990, that Maddie Ray Clifton was born. They say the first thing people noticed about her were her eyes. She had huge, beautiful brown eyes. And from the time she was a little girl, everyone who saw her agreed that she was just a wonderful, very pretty girl, truly just stunning. Her parents' names were Steve and Sheila. They already had a daughter, Jessie, who was born 3 years earlier. And so as Maddie and Jessie were growing up, they became very close sisters. You know, they did literally everything together, although their personalities were completely different. Jessie was considered a bit unpopular and, let's say, nerdy. But Maddie, on the other hand, was a bit of a tomboy who loved sports. Despite this, they were inseparable. You could call it opposites attract, or just a strong sisterly bond. The fact is, they always had each other's backs. Let's go back to November 3rd, 1998. It's a normal Tuesday in the quiet Lakewood neighborhood of Jacksonville. It's election day, people are going about their business, and the evening sun is slowly setting. For 8-year-old Maddie and her 11-year-old sister Jessie, it's just another day after school, full of kids' games and adventures. Maddie, a 3rd grader at a Catholic school, gets home around 4:30. She has her usual routine, play the piano for a bit, and then the best part, run outside to play with friends until dinner. And this day was no exception. She finds her older neighbor, Larry Grisham, and they start playing golf in his yard. But the game doesn't last long, they run out of balls. And this is where a key moment happens. Maddie says she's gonna run home to get more. She runs down the street, and after that, essentially, none of the neighbors saw her again. At first, of course, nobody noticed anything. Kids run back and forth, and this is Lakewood, a safe, friendly neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. The anxiety only started to creep in around 6 in the evening, when their mom, Sheila, came out onto the porch to call the girls for dinner. And this is where the puzzle starts to fall apart. Jessie comes home, Maddie doesn't. Sheila calls again louder. In response, silence. She asks her older daughter, but Jessie doesn't know where her sister is either. They were playing separately that day. Even at this point, there's no real panic yet. Sheila thinks, well, she got caught up playing, she can't hear me. She starts methodically going from neighbor to neighbor, one by one, and with every door where she's told, no, we haven't seen her, her calm gives way to a cold dread. Soon, it's not just Sheila looking for Maddie. The news spreads down the street like fire. Neighbors come out of their houses, they start combing through yards, calling her name. Jessie is on her bike, racing through the alleys, checking every corner. The atmosphere of a calm evening rapidly changes to one that is tense and frantic. No one had seen anything. There were no leads. It's 6:33 p.m. Nearly 15 minutes have passed since Maddie was supposed to be home. 15 minutes that felt like an eternity to her mother. And in that moment, Sheila realizes this isn't just a case of a kid losing track of time. Something is seriously wrong. She dials 911.
Hey, Jean?
Jacksonville 911.
Yes, sir. Hi. I went out to play this afternoon. I thought she was with her, and now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
Where was she playing at around the house?
Right around the house here.
Is she a white female or a black
Yes,
female?
she's a white female.
What did she have on when she left?
She had on a red T-shirt. And, Mama, did you have on jeans? No. I've been upstairs, Mama. I have searched.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Blue jeans?
Mama, did she have on blue jeans? What'd you have on? What kind of shorts?
Pair of shorts?
She had on a pair of shorts and a red T-shirt.
She blonde hair? Black
No,
hair?
she's got reddish-brown hair. It's actually a brown with an auburn tint to it.
What's her name?
It's short. Her name is Maddie. She goes, it's Madeline.
What's her last name?
Clifton. C-L-I-F as in Frank, T-O-N.
When's the last time anybody saw her?
Mama, what time did I come home from boating? About 5:30?
About 5.
4:30 to 5 o'clock. About 5:30 was the last time we saw her. And I was letting the kids play out here for a little while, and then she disappeared, and nobody knows where
She have any friends nearby? Did you go check?
I got every neighbor out here right now.
Okay, the police will be there shortly, ma'am. You keep looking, okay?
Okay, do you know where I am? I mean, I'm at the corner of Fleetwood and Stephen is right there.
What is it?
My husband just came home, and hold on just a moment. Honey, Maddie is gone. No, okay, my husband just pulled up, but she's not with him, of course.
Okay, the police are going to be there shortly, ma'am, okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And you have to give credit to the Lakewood community. They really came together. You know, sometimes in these stories, it takes a while for reality to sink in, for people to start taking a child's disappearance seriously. But that wasn't the case here at all. Hundreds of volunteers were out on the streets that very same night, doing everything they could. They posted flyers with Maddie's photo. They searched every yard on foot. They even brought in the National Guard, who checked the entire sewer system just in case her body had ended up there for some horrible reason. And of course, Maddie's disappearance was all over the local and national news. The police had effectively cordoned off the neighborhood, waiting for some kind of break, for any lead that would help them understand where Maddie was and what had happened to her. But the thing is, there was no breakthrough. The investigators had nothing to go on. Maddie was a normal 8-year-old girl. She had no enemies. She was just playing outside. In cases like this, as you can imagine, investigators always start with the inner circle, the parents. But both Sheila and Steve had solid alibis. Sheila had been at a polling station, which was confirmed. Maddie's father, Steve, was at his job at a metal fabrication shop at the time of his daughter's disappearance. On top of that, the grandmother was watching the girls until their parents got home. But as we remember, it was completely normal for them to play outside without adult supervision. So essentially, the only person who landed on the police's radar was that same older neighbor, Larry, the guy Maddie had been playing golf with right before she vanished. The only reason detectives even paid attention to him was because he was the last person to see her alive. And admittedly, it was a little strange to the investigators that an older man was playing outside with an 8-year-old girl who wasn't a member of his family, so they decided to check his background. And here, they found something interesting. Larry had a criminal record. Multiple arrests for drunk driving, car theft, and even a sexual assault charge, though it had been filed several years ago. In important detail, those charges were dropped, so he was never actually convicted of any sexual offenses. Besides, the potential victims in those cases were adults, so there was no direct reason to believe his motive could be to harm a little girl. But still, with no other leads, the detectives brought him in for questioning. Larry told them everything as it was. Yes, he was playing golf with Maddie, but it was completely, totally innocent. They were hitting balls in his yard, and when they ran out, Maddie said she would run home, grab some more, and they'd continue. Larry recalled that this was around 5:15 p.m. That is over an hour before everyone realized Maddie was missing. He said he waited for a bit for her to come back with the new balls, but she never showed up. He didn't think much of it. He figured she might have been distracted by someone else, or was simply called home for dinner. The police asked Larry to repeat the same story, but this time, while connected to a polygraph, he agreed, but then he failed the test. And this guy's looked very, very bad for him. But despite this, Larry continued to insist he was innocent. He even offered to provide a DNA sample himself to prove he had nothing to do with Maddie's disappearance. This creates a dilemma. He was being cooperative, trying to tell them everything he knew, and now he's offering his DNA. A guilty person wouldn't do that, right? Although, I'll be honest, even if they had taken his samples, they would have been of little use. The investigators still hadn't found Maddie, so there was no DNA from a crime scene to compare Larry's DNA against. Essentially, at this stage, the investigation had hit a dead end. There was no way to prove either his guilt or his innocence. All the detectives could do was to keep questioning him, hoping that at some point he would break and confess. They interrogated him no less than 20 times. They searched his house 9 times. But not a single one of these actions yielded a single solitary piece of evidence. So, as for Larry, the police had no real evidence. They realized they were running in circles and that the only way to move the case forward was to find Maddie. It didn't matter if she was alive or dead. They were counting on her, or in the worst case scenario, her body, to give them some kind of lead, to tell them something they didn't already know. A truly massive search effort began. Police officers and volunteers combed every foot of the local swamps and dense wooded areas. They looked in all the abandoned garages and checked every empty building. They even brought in specially trained cadaver dogs, hoping they could pick up a scent, but none of it yielded any results. So the focus shifted to spreading the word as widely as possible. They printed thousands of flyers, which were distributed not only throughout Florida but also beyond its borders. To reach as many people as possible, they took an unconventional step. Flyers were even handed out at a National Football League game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals. Some local residents began handing out yellow ribbons to constantly remind people of Maddie's disappearance. But day after day passed, and nothing changed. 5 days had gone by, and the initial optimism began to slowly fade. People were getting tired, and it was becoming clear that all these incredible efforts were, so far, in vain. Maddie's parents, Sheila and Steve, were in despair and ready to do anything. They announced a $50,000 reward for anyone who could help bring their daughter back. When they made this announcement at a press conference, they added that the amount would increase to $100,000 if Maddie was found alive and unharmed. Her mom, Sheila, holding back tears, spoke to her daughter through the cameras. "Maddie, if you're out there and can hear us, we're ready for you to come home. Please, come home." While the family waited for any kind of response, their life seemed to freeze. Everything else took a back seat. Work, friends, any daily routines, it was all on pause. And Maddie's older sister, 11-year-old Jessie, was going through a living nightmare. It wasn't just sadness, but a constant, paralyzing fear. A terrible thought had taken root in her young mind. What if the person who took her sister came back for her? It was a very real and terrifying situation for a child who suddenly no longer felt safe in her own home and neighborhood. During this difficult time, one of the police officers stationed outside their house showed incredible humanity. He saw Jessie's condition and volunteered to stay with the family to support her. He assured the little girl that she had nothing to worry about because the police were always nearby and wouldn't let anyone hurt her. They played board games together, and this officer became the adult who could provide a sense of security when her own parents were paralyzed by their grief and simply couldn't give her that. Meanwhile, Sheila and Steve continued to do everything they could to keep Maddie's story in the public eye. On Tuesday, November 10th, exactly a week after her disappearance, they appeared on the national television show Good Morning America to once again tell their story to the entire country. And almost immediately after their interview ended, one of their neighbors, Missy Phillips, came running to their house. She was in a state of extreme agitation, looked distraught, and was urgently looking for a police officer. This behavior was completely out of character for her. The Cliftons knew her well, as Missy had a 14-year-old son named Josh who had once been close friends with Maddie. So of course, they were struck by how alarmed she looked. And here, a very important detail comes up, a bit of backstory that you need to know. Although Josh had once been a close friend of Maddie's, over time, the Cliftons' relationship with him had soured significantly. He had a bad habit of bringing up inappropriate sexual topics in front of the girls. One time, Jessie caught him in her bedroom. He was snooping around, even though no one had given him permission to be in there. Steve and Sheila were so disturbed by this that they banned Josh from coming to their house. But you have to understand that despite this strange behavior in the past, no one seriously considered Josh a suspect when Maddie disappeared. He just didn't have a reputation as a problem child. He never got into serious trouble. He'd never even been sent to the principal's office. What's more, when Maddie went missing, Josh was one of the most active participants in the search. He walked with everyone, helped out, and from the outside, it looked like he was completely, genuinely worried about her, so no one could have imagined that he might be involved. That was until his mother, Missy, came running to the Cliftons' house, practically screaming. She immediately got the attention of one of the officers on duty there and said that she had found something horrible. She explained that she hadn't wanted to believe it herself, but she knew she had to report it. According to her, it all started with her son Josh's room being a terrible mess. Of course, that's nothing unusual for a 14-year-old teenager. And so that morning, she went into his room to tidy up a bit and noticed a large wet spot on the floor next to his bed. Her first thought was the waterbed. It was the 90s. After all, they were popular then, and she figured it must be leaking. To check, she touched the mattress itself and realized it was completely soaked. Missy decided to take the bed apart to find the source of the leak and see if it could be fixed. But when she lifted the mattress off the wooden frame, she saw a small white sock in the space underneath. She tried to pick it up, but the sock was caught on something and wouldn't move. At that same moment, Missy noticed something strange. The entire bed frame was held together in several places with duct tape. The longer she looked at this setup, the less sense it made. Eventually, she got tired of it, and without a second thought, she just ripped the tape off to finally figure out what was going on. The frame fell apart. She saw that same sock again, and this time, she grabbed it firmly. As she did, her hand slid across something ice cold. She then grabbed a flashlight, shone it under the bed, and saw a cold, motionless body. That white sock was on a cold, lifeless foot. Missy's first thought was that she had found Maddie, and that, tragically, the girl was dead and, for some incomprehensible reason, hidden in her son's bedroom. She realized she had to call the police immediately, which she did by running to the first officer she saw. The police officers returned with her, searched Josh's room, and confirmed her worst fears. Maddie's remains were indeed under his bed. The girl was lying in a fetal position in the small space beneath the platform that held the mattress. Her hand was gripping one of the metal brackets of the frame. It looked as if she had still been alive when she was placed there and had grabbed onto it before she died. Maddie was naked from the waist down, but she was still wearing the same white socks and red t-shirt her parents had described, although the shirt was pulled up. Investigators were also able to find her underwear and shorts, which were lying next to the body under the bed. As for the bedroom itself, it was literally filled with air fresheners, incense sticks, and even Febreze spray. It was perfectly clear that someone had been desperately trying to hide the smell of a body. This led detectives to believe that Josh definitely knew she was there, and that he wouldn't be able to pretend that someone else had secretly planted the body in his room. Besides the smell and the air fresheners, they found other evidence. On the blades of the ceiling fan at a height of over 2 meters, there were traces of blood. There was even more blood on his shoes, and DNA analysis confirmed that it belonged to Maddie. During the search, a possible murder weapon was also found in a dresser drawer, a Leatherman multi-tool knife. But the most chilling discoveries were in his nightstand. Next to a pile of air fresheners lay one of the missing posters for Maddie. And under the bed, near the body, they found a photograph of her 11-year-old sister, Jessie, from gymnastics practice. And here, everything came together. It turned out that back in May, several months before the murder, the Cliftons had reported this exact photograph missing to the police. At that same time, Maddie's father had also reported a cordless phone missing from their home. He assumed some neighborhood kid had stolen it, but didn't name anyone. Police later found that phone in the woods behind the Cliftons' house. And a short time after that, the Cliftons received a $500 bill for calls made from the phone to various adult chat lines, you understand. The logic was this. Someone wanted to call phone sex lines, but not from their own home phone where it could be traced. You have to remember this was an era before the widespread use of cell phones. So, when investigators put the recovered photo of Jessie and the story of the phone together, a version of events began to form, that Josh might have been obsessed with Maddie, or her sister Jessie, or even both. And this obsession could somehow be connected to the murder. In addition, there were other strange incidents that the police couldn't directly link to Josh, but which fit into the overall creepy picture. For example, even before Maddie's disappearance, after the phone went missing, Jessie once came home from school to find one of the windows in their house broken. Someone had apparently broken in and gone through the house with a staple gun. The intruder had even stapled the sheets on Maddie's bed to the mattress itself. In another incident, the family discovered strange drilled-like holes in the walls of the house. Years later, Jessie would say in an interview that they reminded her of holes that could have been made to install hidden cameras to record everything happening in the house. It's worth emphasizing that to this day, no one knows for sure who broke the window, who used the staple gun, or who made those holes. It's entirely possible that it had nothing to do with Josh or Maddie's disappearance. However, the missing photograph was found in his bedroom. Looking back, Jessie was convinced that Josh had done it. She believed that he was likely breaking into their house to build up his courage, and that this behavior had escalated over time until it led to the kidnapping and murder of her sister. The most incredible thing in this story is that the police had already searched Josh's room before his mother found the body. This happened at the very beginning of the investigation, right after Maddie disappeared, when detectives were canvassing all the neighbors' houses as a matter of procedure. They spoke with Josh right in his bedroom while he was sitting on his bed. They had no idea that Maddie's body was literally a meter away from them. During that first search, they did notice a faint, strange smell in the room. But Josh had a few pet parrots, and his mom, Missy, just shrugged it off, saying that the birds didn't always smell the best. The detectives accepted that explanation at the time. Of course, now they understood their mistake, but Josh himself suspected nothing. The entire process, from his mother finding the sock to calling the police and the discovery of the body, all happened during the school day. Josh was in class, completely unaware of what was unfolding at home. He was sitting in geography class when 2 police officers walked in and arrested him. Even then, they didn't say a single word to him about what he was suspected of. But he probably figured it all out anyway. And if he hadn't, he found out very quickly. When he was brought to the police station, his father was already waiting for him. He didn't beat around the bush and immediately blurted out, "Joshua, your mother found Maddie's body under your waterbed this morning. What the hell is going on?" After that, Josh's interrogation began. He didn't hold out for long and confessed to everything almost immediately. According to him, on the evening of November 3rd, the day of the disappearance, Maddie came to his house to play. His parents weren't home, and he was strictly forbidden from having friends over in their absence. He was playing baseball with her in the backyard. At some point, as Josh told it, he hit the ball too hard and it struck Maddie right in the eye. She started crying loudly. And the only thing he could think about in that moment was how furious his father would be when he found out he had hurt the neighbor girl. Josh claimed that in that moment he panicked. He covered Maddie's mouth with his hands so no one would hear her crying and dragged her into the house. But that didn't help, it only scared her more, and she started to scream. So he grabbed a baseball bat and hit her over the head to make her be quiet. When Maddie continued to moan, he grabbed a knife and ended her life. He insisted that all of this happened because he was in a panic, couldn't think clearly, and was terrified of being punished. In any case, according to his story, he knew his parents were about to come home, and thinking Maddie was already unconscious, he shoved her under the mattress of his bed. Then he washed the blood from his hands and made sure everything in the house looked normal. But when he returned to his bedroom, he heard that Maddie was still breathing. It was a heavy, rattling, but very loud breath. By that point, his father was already home, and Josh was afraid he would hear the sound and start asking what was going on. Then, according to Josh, he grabbed the knife again and delivered a final control strike to make sure the victim was dead. He repeated again and again that he was just panicking and was afraid of being discovered. Josh said that after this, certain that Maddie was dead, he pushed her deeper under the bed with his foot and reassembled the frame. And the most horrific detail in this entire story is that he was most likely wrong. She probably wasn't dead yet. When the police found the body, Maddie was clutching one of the support brackets that held the frame together. This meant that she had survived the beating with the bat and the multiple stab wounds, only to die in complete darkness under the mattress, while Josh's parents were in the same house suspecting nothing. If they had known what was happening, they might have been able to call 911 and save her, but instead Josh hid Maddie as if she were his own dirty little secret. He slept on that bed for a whole week knowing her body was lying right beneath him. Several times during that week, the bed frame began to fall apart since it wasn't designed to conceal a body, and Josh had to tape it together with duct tape. As for why the bed was wet, the waterbed was likely leaking, perhaps it had been punctured. It's not known for sure how it happened. Maybe when the frame started to break, it just accelerated the deterioration of the whole structure. It was then that Josh realized that the duct tape also helped to contain the smell of the body, at least partially. Eventually, he switched from clear tape to heavy-duty painter's tape, and when the smell became so strong that even that didn't help, he started buying air fresheners in bulk. He had to constantly replace them because they could only mask the terrible stench for a short time. While all this was going on, Josh behaved in an extremely quiet and withdrawn manner. His parents noticed that he had become somewhat strange, but they chalked it up to him just being worried about his missing neighborhood friend, Maddie. You could say he was indeed worried, but not at all in the way they thought. Now, the truth was beginning to come out, or at least the version of the truth that Josh told. It seems the detectives also had major doubts about his story. They began to collect evidence and compare it with Josh's testimony, and a lot of things didn't add up. For example, there wasn't a single bruise on Maddie's eye area. If she had really been hit in the face with a baseball, as he claimed, there should have been at least a bruise, if not serious swelling. Furthermore, the authorities somehow found out that Josh had been watching adult films immediately before and right after the murder. The very fact of watching such films, considering that the girl's pants and underwear had been removed, did not fit with the story of a murder committed in a state of panic. Josh himself claimed that her shorts and underwear had come off while he was dragging her into the house, and her shoes had come off when he was shoving her under the bed the second time. In any case, by that point, the police already had Maddie's body and the killer's confession, but they hadn't yet made any public statements. So, rumors were still spreading throughout the city. Maybe his mom, Missy, told someone, or one of the neighbors overheard her conversation with the police, or maybe the classmates who saw Josh's arrest put two and two together. Maddie's disappearance was the top news story, so it wasn't hard to guess. One way or another, the news leaked. People heard that Maddie had been found dead. Many volunteers refused to believe it until the very end. They even held a round-the-clock prayer vigil, hoping it was just a rumor. But all hope was extinguished when the local sheriff held a press conference. He officially confirmed that Maddie had been murdered and that her remains had been identified. Now, the only thing the investigation was truly missing was a real motive, because again, Josh's story didn't hold up to scrutiny. It seemed there was something more behind it, but no one understood what could have possibly made him do it. To try and figure this out, detectives began to look into Josh's past. He was only 14, and he considered Maddie his friend. So, who was Josh? He was born on March 17th, 1984, and grew up in Pennsylvania. He had two older half-brothers who lived separately, as they were more than 10 years older than him. In 1996, 2 years before the murder, Josh's family moved to Florida into the same neighborhood where Maddie lived. There was a lot of tension surrounding this move. His older brothers were against it, but his parents had already made up their minds. His father, Steve, was an alcoholic, had substance abuse problems, and was violent towards both Josh and his mother. He established extremely strict rules, like that same rule about not inviting friends over when the parents weren't home. And for some unknown reason, Steve had a strange, prejudiced attitude towards little girls. He openly disliked them. This was later mentioned by both Josh and his mother. All of this created a very difficult atmosphere at home. But despite this, before the murder, everyone around considered Josh to be a good kid. He did his chores, walked the dog every day, and played with the other children. In school, he was a bit of a class clown, but never got into serious trouble. He was an average C student. When the news of his arrest spread through his school, many of his classmates simply couldn't believe it. Some of them just kept repeating his name, as if trying to make sense of what they had heard. In the lead-up to the trial, his lawyer constantly referred to Maddie's death as an accident. He described Josh as, quote, a sweet 14-year-old boy who got into a horrible situation in which his friend died, and he's very upset about it. So, the defense's idea was to present Josh not as a killer, but as a victim of circumstances. The logic was, if everyone around thought he was a good kid, then maybe he was, and everything that happened was just a tragic accident that spiraled out of his control. The lawyer also hinted that Josh had some kind of mental disorder, but at that stage he didn't go into detail. Later, the defense ordered a brain scan for Josh, which, they claimed, showed damage to his frontal lobe. So, their line of defense was this. Josh had problems with his brain that caused him to panic easily and prevented him from thinking clearly in a stressful situation. During his initial statements, the lawyer made it clear they would fight if Josh was tried as an adult or charged with first-degree premeditated murder. If his case had been heard in juvenile court, he would have faced a very short prison term, which would have ended when he turned 19. It seems this is what they were counting on. But, as it turned out, the prosecution was determined. Josh was charged with first-degree murder, and they decided to try him as an adult. While he awaited trial, he was transferred from a juvenile center to a regular jail, where he was housed with adult criminals. His photograph was all over the news. The teenager who had recently had a reputation as a good kid was now known across the country as being accused of a brutal murder. Of course, no one thought of him as a good kid anymore. The situation became so tense that his mother, Missy, couldn't even leave her house for fear of judgment and the overwhelming public attention. She spent all her time within her four walls, even though she had done nothing wrong. In fact, she was the one who helped solve the crime. She was the one who reported her terrible discovery to the police, even though she knew perfectly well that it would create huge problems for her son. And, to their credit, Maddie's family understood this. They didn't blame Missy, especially Maddie's older sister, Jessie. And here, something truly amazing and very human happens. Jessie would come to Missy's house every day and offer her help, to walk their dog or bring in groceries from the car. The level of kindness she showed was simply incredible. Jessie and Missy became very close. It turned out that They were both experiencing a loss. Jessie had lost her sister, and Missy had, in essence, lost her son on the day she found out what he was capable of. She still loved Josh and wanted to support him, but she understood that the good boy she thought she had raised was actually a completely different person. As for the trial itself, it was supposed to take place in Jacksonville, but due to the huge media frenzy, they decided to move it. To prevent the hearing from turning into a circus, the case was transferred to a court in Polk County, Florida, which is about a 3-hour drive south. Considering the high-profile nature of the case, you might have expected a long, drawn-out process that would last for weeks. But the trial lasted only 2 days, starting on July 6, 1999. During the hearings, Josh didn't say a single word. His lawyer continued to insist that this was not a premeditated murder and that Josh had no real motive. In his opening statement, he declared, "The evidence will show that he is not a monster." But the prosecutors weren't there to play games. They presented every horrific detail to the jury. They even brought a part of Josh's bed into the courtroom to visually demonstrate exactly how Maddie's body had been hidden. The baseball bat he had used to hit the girl on the head was also presented as evidence. Then they began to show the autopsy photos. It was an incredibly tense moment. The images were so gruesome that Maddie's family had to leave the courtroom. The autopsy itself confirmed that the girl's death had been slow and painful. And that was before the witnesses began one by one to dismantle Josh's story. For example, many neighbors stated that they found it very strange that Josh and Maddie were supposedly playing baseball in his backyard. It turned out that the kids from their street did indeed play baseball often, but they always did it in Maddie's front yard. According to the neighbors, there simply wasn't enough space in Josh's backyard to play baseball. Questions were also raised about the condition of Maddie's body. There was no dirt or grass stains on her clothes, which should have been there if she had been playing in the yard and was then dragged across the ground into the house, as Josh claimed. The evidence just didn't line up with his story. Even on the baseball he supposedly hit her with, experts found no traces of blood. So more and more inconsistencies were appearing in his story. Furthermore, a neighbor named Rose Illardy took the stand and told of a strange incident that happened shortly before the murder. She had seen Maddie playing in her yard and Josh began to sneak up on her from behind. Rose wanted to shout at him to leave the girl alone, but at that moment, Maddie herself turned around and saw him. After that, Rose didn't think much of it and went back inside. Of course, at the time, it looked like a normal children's game, but in light of what happened, this testimony created the impression that Josh had been harboring some kind of plan for Maddie for a long time. And so when it was the defense's turn to present their version of events, something completely unexpected happened. Josh's lawyer did nothing. Literally, he did not call a single witness in his client's defense. It was as if he had simply realized that their case was a complete lost cause. The evidence was irrefutable, and it was obvious that Josh had been lying from the very beginning. The defense also did not present those same brain scans that supposedly showed damage to his frontal lobe. You would think that this would be a central part of their strategy to prove that Josh had acted in a state of panic. But for unknown reasons, perhaps because the court deemed them inadmissible, this evidence was never used. It seemed the defense simply had no backup plan. They silently concluded their portion of the proceedings. So, after that, it took the jury a little over 2 hours of deliberation to reach a verdict. They found Josh guilty. When it was announced that no one had believed his story about it being an accident and that he had been found guilty of first-degree murder, Josh showed no emotion. He was completely indifferent. After the verdict was delivered, during the sentencing hearings, the families were given the floor. Maddie's mother, Sheila, gave her statement. Josh's parents, in turn, had a different opinion. Although his mother, Missy, had helped the police find the body and arrest her son, she and her husband did not believe that a 14-year-old teenager deserved the severe punishment that was mandated for first-degree murder.
State to prosecute a 14-year-old for first-degree murder is ludicrous and obscene. Mr. Shorstein and Mr. Plotkin should be ashamed of themselves in this matter. Their actions were carefully plotted for the press to further their own political gains.
His mother, still believing an abnormality in the teenager's brain, made him do the unthinkable.
There is no one on this earth who was more shocked at the discovery in his bedroom than I. There are no words to describe what I felt that morning. And I stand here still with reasonable doubt in my heart that Josh even did what he was convicted of. I have no doubt in regard to the brain lesions, but I do have reasonable doubt in that I have never in 15 plus years ever seen Josh violent towards another living being.
Of course, Maddie's parents had the complete opposite view. When it was their turn to speak, they talked about their unbearable loss and the void that their daughter's death had left in their lives. So, their request to the court was direct and unambiguous. They asked for the maximum penalty allowed by law. For them, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice for Maddie and about making sure other children would be safe in the future.
I wanted desperately to see Maddie before she was buried. The funeral home director said too much time had passed, but I did not want to remember Maddie that way. I could not say goodbye to her. I could not kiss her or hold her. They told me she was in that casket, but I could not see her.
It is written in the 17th chapter of Luke that Jesus said to his disciples that it would be better if a millstone were hung around your neck and that you were thrown into the sea than to cause harm to a child. I'm certain that on Judgment Day, you, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, will be given a far harsher sentence than I can impose.
After the trial, the Clifton family had to somehow get back to living. They had to relearn what normal meant for them now after having gone through something so horrific. This was all especially hard for Jessie, Maddie's older sister. Before the tragedy, Jessie was a typical quiet girl, not very popular in school, and she was even bullied sometimes. But suddenly, after her sister's death, she found herself at the center of attention. Everyone felt sorry for her, and a lot of kids who had never paid her any mind before suddenly wanted to be her friend. Jessie just didn't know how to react to it all. The attention felt insincere, like these new friends didn't actually know her as a person, but just wanted to be associated with a high-profile story. In an interview later, she described the burden that fell on her. I was alone, and I tried so hard to be strong because I knew that if I fell apart, my parents would fall apart too. She also mentioned that due to the trauma, she had memory gaps and remembered almost nothing from the period immediately following the funeral. It was a psychological defense mechanism. A year after the trial, on June 25th, 2000, another tragedy struck. Josh's father was killed in a car accident. This was a huge blow to his mother, Missy. In a very short span of time, she had effectively lost her entire family. Her son was in prison for life, and her husband was dead. And in this terrible situation, she received support from the most unexpected place, from Sheila, Maddie's mother. Just as Jessie had helped Missy before, now Sheila was supporting her. The Clifton family, in essence, took Missy in and treated her like one of their own. It was an amazing display of humanity, as two women, wounded in different ways by the same tragedy, found comfort in each other. However, this friendship couldn't last forever. After a few years, Sheila realized she could no longer live in that same house. Every corner reminded her of Maddie and of what had happened. Eventually, she moved out, and later, she and Steve got divorced. The trauma had proved to be too much for their marriage. But even that isn't the end of the story. 10 years after the murder, Josh, while in prison, gave an interview to the Florida Times-Union newspaper. Throughout the entire conversation, he spoke mostly about himself, about his feelings, about how prison had changed him, and how he personally was experiencing the situation.
Really tell if this is just average, grown up maturing. The fact that I had to come to terms in dealing with that I'm going to die in here, I might do 60, 70 years in prison, really helped me mature and help me grow morally and help me develop empathy, a much stronger empathy now than I ever had. And I don't know that I was sentenced to say I got locked up, all right, and they treated me as a juvenile, and they said, okay, you're getting out at 24. Because in Florida law, your YOs go up to 24. So if they did that, what would have happened? I'd be out right now. Matter of fact, I'd be out right now. And I don't know what would happen. Would I still be the same kind of person? Because I wouldn't have had to come to terms with a life sentence. I was just doing every day, I was doing my time and just going through all the programs and everything. And I never had a time to think. They kept me so busy, I didn't really get to think too much. And when I finally did sit down and realize it, I was sitting there one day, I'm like, man, life sentence, all right? And I started thinking a little more, and it happened a couple times, but I never got further than that. And then one day it just kind of hit me. I remember what it was too. I came out of the chow hall, and when I came out of the chow hall, I see this line of people, and there they are. There's like 30 or 40 of them. You know, there's that Wakulla in the Panhandle, and they're all old. They're all 60, 70 years old. You know, or they're just 50 and look really bad, you know, because the prison time's been rough on them. They all got canes and walkers and stuff like that. It's the pill line. They're picking up their medication. And it's like, wow, you know, that's going to be me. And that's when it really hit me. It's like, oh my God. And I got really depressed when that happened. And I was depressed. I was in a funk for a little while because it finally set in. And then I really started thinking, like, man, because at first it was just that's going to be me. Then I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to get there. And that's when I realized, like, oh my goodness, I'm 15 years old. You know, it's going to be 60 years before I look like them, you know what I mean? And then even then I might live longer, you know?
Do you ever think about Maddie?
All the time. All the time. And it always puts me in a mindset where it's like, not always, but a lot of times, I end up going like, all right, well, maybe I did deserve to be here. Maybe I deserve too much time. Maybe I deserve to die in prison. And but I always usually come back with the thought that I can't look at it like that, you know, and that doing that is just a cop-out and faking it, you know, just saying screw it, and why would I try to learn anything? Why would I try to improve myself? Why would I try to do anything to help anybody if I'm just going to lay down and just die in here, you know? So a lot of people say, do you think you deserve to get out? I said, I don't know, as I always said before, I really don't know if I deserve it or not, you know, but I know I want it. I want to get out. I want a second chance. And I know that I know that I would live by it, you know? I know I would do good. When I think about it now, I had like a little apology letting thing I go through to make certain that she knows that I'm sorry, you know, and also that I'm trying. I'm trying to make her life worth something. You know what I mean? I'm trying because I'm still here. So I'm trying to make certain that I can be somebody, you know, not because I need to be somebody, but because I can be someone who can help people. You know, I don't want to be just about, you know, I want to be someone who can relieve suffering.
Even when the conversation turned to Maddie and her murder, Josh spoke about it only briefly and quickly shifted the focus back to how the event had impacted his own life and development. It created the impression that the horrific death of a little girl was, for him, just some kind of life lesson. And you might think that the story ended there, but it didn't. In August 2017, Josh's case was back in court for a resentencing hearing. The reason for this was that Florida had changed its laws regarding teenagers sentenced to life in prison. These changes were based on scientific research, which proved that the adolescent brain is not yet fully developed, and therefore they can't always be held legally responsible for their actions to the same degree as adults. In addition, during his years in prison, Josh had been a model inmate. He earned his high school diploma and had no disciplinary problems. Because of all this, the state decided that perhaps he deserved a second chance and a right to freedom. Of course, for Maddie's family, this news was shocking and they were adamantly against it. And what was probably especially difficult for them was the length of the new hearing. It went on for 4 days, twice as long as the original trial where he was convicted. This meant that the Clifton family had to sit in the courtroom and, for a second time, listen to every horrific detail about the murder of their 8-year-old daughter. It was as if the entire process was repeating all over again. They expressed their feelings about this in interviews they gave at the time.
During these past few days, I've sat here in this courtroom and I have listened to all of the classes that the defendant has been able to take. What classes has Maddie been able to take over the past 18 years?
I didn't walk her down the aisle at her wedding, and we were not given the gift of her grandchildren, all taken by one evil, senseless act. And we don't know why.
He has all these certificates and he's a monk now and has found peace with his life, and that's great, but I still don't get to talk to Maddie. I still don't get to watch her graduate from high school, watch her graduate from college, watch her get married. I don't get to do any of that, and I just don't think that it's fair. I don't think it's fair that he does. This is Maddie's room right here.
Her childhood home.
Kept our doors open and would yell at each other through here at the middle of the night and tell each other stories, and she'd end up in my bedroom and, Sissy, can I come sleep with you?
Where she says she plans to stay forever.
This was the best years of my life, and so being here, it just feels like I'm home.
During one of these hearings, Josh publicly addressed the Clifton family for the first time. His apology speech was quite long.
I've wanted to say this for a very long time, and I'm grateful that this chance to do so in person has arrived. I don't pretend to know or understand your pain or to grasp the void that I have created in your lives. I can say this: I do understand pain. I have become quite intimate with suffering. Growing up in prison, I've seen many dark things, and I've been to some dark places. Many times throughout this journey, I came dreadfully close to ending my life just to escape it all. During these times, I was embroiled in a flurry of emotions and feelings: guilt, despair, pain, hopelessness, fear, and shame. Each time, I was somehow able to continue on, mostly because I couldn't stand to put my mother through any more trauma. She's been through enough. There were times that I was angry at her because I couldn't end my pain because of her love. Yet now, I'm eternally grateful to her. I'm grateful to her because as I've grown up, I have learned the value of life. I've learned to see the beauty and joy in a world full of strife and experience the truth of unconditional love. I wish to God that I could have known this or understood it when I was 14. Had I then, none of this would have come about. I had no clue what life meant, what death meant, nor the depths of suffering that could follow one act. I had no inkling of how long that suffering could last. I hadn't lived long enough to understand the time involved or what really suffering was. I did something horrible. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened. Even now, after all these years, it is just unfathomable that all this could have occurred. It tears my mind asunder to know that I stole such a precious life from you, from the world. I so wish I could take away your pain. I thank God that I've been able to continue on in life and grow, but not a day goes by that I don't think of what led me to where I'm at. Not in prison, but in life. I pray every day that you're able to live your lives in spite of the injury I've caused you. I'm supremely grateful to have an opportunity at physical freedom. Any joy that arises in my heart is immediately tempered by the knowledge that these proceedings bring all involved once again, face to face with the horror that occurred in 1998. When I walked the rec yard here in chains, I looked to the sky through mesh wiring, and I thank God repeatedly for giving me hope. My next breath is always devoted to wishing peace and healing upon you all. My hopes, fears, and wishes probably mean nothing to you, but they are there all the same. May you know peace, may you be free from suffering, and may you feel the love that is the sustenance of life itself. May God bless you and heal your wounds as much as possible. Thank you, Your Honor.
So, despite all these hearings, the court ultimately upheld the original sentence. Joshua Phillips was once again sentenced to life in prison. However, strangely enough, this saga is still not over. Under Florida law, his case was subject to a new review after 25 years of imprisonment, which came up in 2023. That process has begun, and as of now, there is no final decision, so the story continues. In any case, if Maddie were alive today, she would be in her mid-30s. Maybe she would be married, have her own children. Instead, her life was cut short, and she never got to go through all the stages of growing up that her older sister Jessie did. And honestly, I still have so many questions about this case. The main one is why. There is still no clear, logical motive, especially if you dismiss Josh's story about the baseball accident, which, as we've seen, doesn't line up with the evidence at all. And if a person can't be honest about the reason they killed someone, then how can there be any talk of release? Perhaps that's why his sentence is still in effect. Personally, I lean towards the idea that the motive could have been related to a sexual undertone. Perhaps it was an obsession or a fixation on Maddie and Jessie. Remember the facts. The stolen photograph, the stolen cordless phone that was used to call sex lines. Maybe he was just a teenager going through puberty who couldn't control his impulses. Of course, that's in no way an excuse, but it's at least some version of a motive. And what do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. In any case, it's important to talk about cases like these because they remind us of one simple but terrifying truth. We never truly know who is living next door. Evil can be hiding behind the door of the very next house. And this isn't to scare you, it's just a reminder to be more attentive. More attentive not only to yourselves, but to your loved ones, to your children. And more importantly, if you see something disturbing in the behavior of a neighbor, a classmate, a friend, anyone say something about it, pay attention to it. It can't be said that there were many of these warning signs in Josh's case, but who knows, maybe there were some after all. I don't know, I still get goosebumps when I think about this story. It's another reminder that you always have to be vigilant. You can't trust anyone in this life. It's sad to admit, and it sounds very pessimistic, but it's the truth. Thank you for your attention. If this story affected you, don't forget to leave a like and of course subscribe to the channel. By the way, I'm already working on a new Simply Incredible case, and most likely as you're watching this, it's already in the final stages of editing. While you wait, I suggest you check out one of the videos that have now appeared on your screen. Click on any of them. Believe me, the stories there are no less shocking, so I sincerely recommend it. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and most importantly, take care of your children. And may God bless America.